David Beckham recently became the very first billionaire footballer. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry allegedly invited him over to Australia and then disregarded him like some old Kleenex because the bottom line was he couldn't get a picture with them.
David Beckham just said no to Harry and Meghan, and that single rejection tells you everything you need to know about where these two stand in the celebrity world right now. This is not about petty grudges or tabloid drama. This is about a pattern that has repeated itself so many times that even the most diplomatic A-listers have quietly stopped returning phone calls. When a man who flew 24 hours across the globe after receiving a personal invitation from the Sussexes decides he wants nothing more to do with them, you have to ask yourself what exactly happened in that room. The answer, according to multiple sources, is painfully simple. Beckham showed up in Australia ready to support Harry and Meghan during their tour. He cleared his schedule, endured the brutal long-haul flight, and arrived expecting at minimum some basic courtesy from the couple who had specifically asked him to be there. What he got instead was treatment that one insider described as being discarded like old Kleenex. The Beckhams could not even get a photograph with the very people who had invited them, and the reason was never adequately explained. They were simply shuffled aside when they were no longer useful. Think about the audacity of that for a moment. You personally reach out to one of the most famous athletes in British history. You ask him to travel halfway around the world to support your cause, and then when he arrives, you treat him as if he is an inconvenience. This is not how you build alliances in any industry, let alone in the tight-knit world of celebrity where reputation is currency and word travels fast. What makes this story particularly telling is what Beckham did next. He did not give angry interviews or leak damaging stories to the press. He simply moved on and continued building his empire while the Sussexes watched their own influence shrink year after year. The contrast between where Beckham stands today and where Harry and Meghan find themselves could not be more stark, and that gap is about to become even more obvious. But the Beckham situation was not an isolated incident. It fits into a much larger pattern that has alienated some of the biggest names in entertainment, fashion, and media, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The timing of the Beckham snub becomes even more major when you look at where David Beckham is right now compared to the Sussexes. Just weeks ago, Beckham officially became the first billionaire footballer in history. His business ventures, brand partnerships, and ownership stakes have accumulated into a fortune that puts him in truly rarefied air. The man who kicked a ball for a living has built something that will outlast any athletic career, and he did it while maintaining relationships with some of the most powerful people on the planet. Meanwhile, Beckham has been getting closer to the very institution that Harry abandoned. He recently unveiled a garden at the Chelsea Flower Show, working alongside King Charles on a project celebrating British nature and craftsmanship. The two men have reportedly bonded over their shared love of beekeeping, spending time together at royal estates discussing everything from hives to honey production. One source close to the situation described Beckham as almost like another surrogate son to the king, filling a space that Harry left vacant when he departed for California. The visual contrast here is almost too perfect to ignore. You have Harry, estranged from his father, reduced to making phone calls that go unanswered and releasing carefully staged anniversary videos from his Montecito mansion. And you have Beckham, who has no royal blood whatsoever, standing in the gardens of British estates, receiving the king's personal attention and friendship. One man walked away from the establishment and burned bridges on his way out. The other man built those same bridges carefully over decades and is now reaping the rewards. What Beckham understood, and what Harry seemingly never grasped, is that institutions have long memories. You can criticize them, you can push for change from within, but once you position yourself as an enemy, the doors close and they tend to stay closed. Beckham played the long game. He stayed cordial with the royals, kept his public statements measured, and built a reputation as someone who could be trusted with access. Harry did the opposite, and the consequences have been severe. The king now has an ambassador who shows up to events looking polished and grateful, who speaks about the monarchy with respect, and who never puts Charles in an awkward position with a surprise interview revelation. That ambassador is David Beckham, not the king's own son. If that does not tell you everything about where things stand, nothing will. But Beckham himself might not have been the primary target of the original fallout. Many sources suggest the real tension began with Victoria. Victoria Beckham reportedly had her own falling out with Meghan, and the cause was surprisingly mundane. According to multiple sources, Meghan wanted designer clothing from Victoria's fashion line for free, not loaned, not borrowed with strict return protocols, just handed over without cost because of who Meghan was married to. Here is where some important context matters. Even Catherine, Princess of Wales, the woman who will one day be queen, does not receive designer items free of charge. What Catherine gets is an opportunity to wear pieces on loan, with careful agreements about how they will be worn, photographed, and returned. The fashion houses benefit from the publicity. The princess gets beautiful clothing for public events, and everyone understands the arrangement. There are protocols, there are expectations, and there is mutual respect for how the system works. Meghan reportedly could not get the grip of that whatsoever. She allegedly expected that her position as a senior royal entitled her to a different arrangement entirely. The expectation was that designers should feel honored to simply give her things, and the negotiations around standard loan agreements were apparently frustrating to her. This created friction with Victoria Beckham specifically, who had worked for years to build a legitimate fashion brand and was not about to undermine her own business model for anyone. What makes this particularly interesting is how Victoria has been described by those who know her. She is courteous, she is a royalist, she has genuine affection for the institution and the people within it. These are not qualities that Meghan apparently shares, and the difference in approach created a fundamental incompatibility. Victoria built relationships within the establishment slowly and carefully. Meghan reportedly expected those relationships to simply materialize because of her title. The fashion world is small, and it talks. Designers communicate with each other, stylists share information, and when someone develops a reputation for being difficult about standard industry practices, that reputation spreads quickly. Victoria Beckham was not the last person in fashion to have reservations about working with the Duchess, and those reservations would soon extend to the highest levels of the industry. Speaking of fashion industry royalty, the Kardashians have their own story to tell about the Sussexes, and it is not flattering. Kim and Khloe Kardashian publicly discussed what has come to be known as Photogate, the incident at a 70th birthday party where Meghan apparently caused drama over photographs. The Kardashians, who have built an empire on understanding public perception and carefully managing their image, were open about their experience with the Sussexes, and their openness suggests they have no concern about maintaining that relationship. What makes this worse for Harry and Meghan is what happened after the initial incident. According to sources, Harry has been putting in phone calls trying to make amends with the Kardashian family. Those calls are falling on deaf ears. The family that turned a reality show into a multi-billion-dollar business empire has apparently decided that the Sussex relationship is not worth repairing. The reason comes down to trust, or rather the complete absence of it. The Kardashians claim that Harry and Meghan fabricated details about a contract signing situation. The specifics involve business discussions that the Sussexes allegedly misrepresented to outside parties. When confronted about the discrepancies, the Sussex response followed a familiar pattern. They blamed someone who had left their employment and supposedly fed incorrect information to the media. This is a defense they have used repeatedly, and it has become predictable enough that people no longer accept it at face value. The Kardashians did not become billionaires by being naive about how people operate. They have seen every manipulation tactic in the book, and they apparently recognize the Sussex playbook for what it is. When a family that made its fortune through careful image management decides you are not worth the trouble, that is a major data point about your reputation in Hollywood. Harry's phone calls are not just being ignored by one family member with a grudge. The entire Kardashian machine has apparently decided to keep its distance. And when you consider how strategic that family is about every relationship they maintain, their rejection of the Sussexes speaks volumes about what the industry whisper network is saying. But the fashion establishment's rejection of Meghan goes beyond the Kardashians and the Beckhams. It reaches all the way to Anna Wintour. When Meghan attended an event in Paris recently, Anna Wintour was also present. The editor of American Vogue, arguably the most powerful person in fashion publishing, made a very deliberate choice that observers immediately noticed. She sidestepped entering the room at the same time as Meghan. She waited, let Meghan go in first, then followed separately. This might seem like a small detail, but in the world of fashion optics, it is major. Anna Wintour understood that walking in alongside Meghan would create photographs that looked like endorsement. Those images would circulate. They would be used to suggest a relationship and approval that does not actually exist, and Anna was not willing to provide that visual. She is too media savvy to be caught in an accidental cosign. Now consider what Wintour has done since that careful avoidance. She has publicly aligned herself with the Kardashians, the same reality television family that has expressed frustration with the Sussexes. Anna Wintour, the woman who sets the agenda for what fashion considers important and relevant, has chosen to endorse a family that started on television over a woman who married into the British monarchy. That choice tells you exactly where Meghan stands with the fashion establishment. Wintour is known to be a big royalist. She was close with Queen Elizabeth, and she has maintained warm relationships with King Charles. She attended royal events. She has been photographed warmly greeting members of the family, and she clearly values those connections. Anna is not going to jeopardize her standing with the actual monarchy by cozying up to the couple that has spent years publicly attacking it. The fashion world has quietly closed ranks, and Meghan finds herself on the outside. She can still get designers to dress her for public appearances. She can still purchase expensive clothing for her closet, but the genuine embrace from the industry that she clearly craves remains out of reach. The people who actually run fashion have made their calculations, and Meghan is not coming out ahead in any of them. While the fashion establishment was keeping its distance, Meghan decided to jet off to Geneva for what was supposed to be a major public appearance. The reality of what happened there tells its own brutal story. Meghan flew approximately 6,000 miles to speak about the dangers of artificial intelligence at a memorial event. The speech was positioned as a serious policy intervention, a chance for the Duchess to establish herself as a thought leader on technology and child safety. The organizers flew her in free of charge, put her up in accommodation, and presumably expected that her presence would draw major attention to their cause. What actually happened was embarrassing for everyone except possibly Meghan herself. Approximately 24 people showed up to hear her speak. 24. The event organizers had brought crowd control barricades expecting masses of admirers, and instead they got a gathering that one observer compared unfavorably to a raccoon holding a bag of Doritos in terms of drawing power. The optics were devastating. There is Meghan in her expensive Armani suit, clutching a microphone, delivering prepared remarks to what was basically an empty room. The barricades designed to manage crowds stood useless, mocking the assumption that crowds would need managing at all. This is a woman who married into the most photographed family on earth, who had access to audiences of billions, and who now cannot fill a small event space in Switzerland. A source familiar with the reaction suggested that from Meghan's perspective, the trip was still a success. She got a free flight, a designer outfit, and a platform to speak. Whether anyone was listening seems to have been secondary to the fact that she was the one doing the talking. But for the organizations involved and for anyone watching the coverage, the humiliation was obvious. The timing of this disaster made it worse. Just days earlier, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had completed a triumphant visit to Italy, her first solo trip abroad since her cancer diagnosis. She spent time with children, she created beautiful photo opportunities, and she reminded the world why she remains one of the most admired women on the planet. Meghan's empty room in Geneva stood in stark contrast to Catherine's warm reception everywhere she went. But the Geneva speech contained another layer of irony that critics were quick to point out, and it speaks to a pattern that has defined Meghan's public advocacy.
Meghan Markle's visit to Switzerland memorial event last weekend has just got worse for her. Meghan Markle accused of reading AI-generated speech.
After Meghan delivered her warnings about the dangers of artificial intelligence and emerging technology, critics decided to run her actual speech through AI detection systems. The results, according to those who conducted the analysis, suggested the text was unusually polished, repetitive, and rhythmically structured in ways consistent with AI-assisted drafting. The contradiction is almost too perfect. Here is someone who flew across the world to warn about the dangers of artificial intelligence, potentially using artificial intelligence to write the very warning. Whether the speech was fully AI-generated, partially AI-assisted, or simply written in a style that mimics AI patterns, the optics are terrible. You cannot position yourself as a voice of caution about technology while apparently benefiting from the very technology you are cautioning against. This fits a broader pattern that critics have identified with both Harry and Meghan. They advocate for online safety while never publicly denouncing the harassment campaigns conducted by their most aggressive supporters, the Sussex Squad. They talk about privacy while releasing memoirs full of intimate family details and sitting for multi-hour interviews with Oprah. They warn about social media dangers while posting carefully curated content to Instagram designed to shape public perception. The phrase that keeps coming up is "do as I say, not as I do." Meghan wants to be taken seriously as an advocate on issues she has no particular expertise in, while her own behavior contradicts the principles she claims to champion. The AI speech controversy is just the latest example of a credibility gap that has been widening for years. What authority does she actually bring to discussions about technology policy? What background does she have in AI development, in child psychology, in regulatory frameworks? The answer is none. She is a former actress who married a prince, and her qualifications to lecture the World Health Organization on emerging technology begin and end with her willingness to show up and take the microphone. The Geneva disaster needed to be buried quickly, and the Sussex team apparently decided that the solution was a carefully staged video celebrating Harry and Meghan's wedding anniversary.
If you remember this video, a couple of months back now, where they were dancing in the garden of their Montecito mansion, and we were supposed to believe that this particular video was filmed by a 4-year-old. You see what I mean? This is how stupid they think you are.
The execution of this plan revealed more than they probably intended. The video that appeared on Meghan's social media showed Harry walking into the kitchen carrying a cake, supposedly surprising his wife on their special day. The children could be heard in the background but not seen. Candles flickered on the cake. Meghan expressed delight. It was meant to showcase a loving family celebrating in their beautiful home. According to sources, this simple video required 3 or 4 takes to get right. The first time Harry came in, the candle blew out. The second time, he apparently missed his mark somehow. By the third attempt, they had something usable. This is not the spontaneous family moment they are selling. This is a production filmed by a staff member with careful attention to lighting, product placement, and camera angles. The staging was obvious to anyone paying attention. There was Meghan's candle line prominently positioned. There was the subdued lighting designed to create atmosphere while hiding details of the kitchen. There was the children's artwork visible in the background, establishing that this is definitely a family home. Every element was considered, every shot was composed, and the authenticity they were going for was undermined by the obvious calculation behind every choice. Internet observers also noticed a mathematical problem. The cake had 4 candles on it, but this was supposedly their 8th wedding anniversary. Either someone miscounted, or this footage was actually from a different year being passed off as current. Neither explanation makes Meghan look particularly credible. But perhaps the most revealing detail came from the British Airways anniversary card that Meghan posted on her Instagram. She thanked the flight crew for their lovely gesture, making it seem like a spontaneous act of kindness from airline employees who remembered her wedding date. Research by curious internet users revealed a different story. British Airways provides anniversary cards when passengers request them, either at the time of booking or by mentioning the occasion to cabin crew. You have to tell them, they do not just remember. So Meghan apparently informed the airline of her anniversary, received the card she had basically ordered, and then posted it as though strangers had surprised her with unprompted kindness. She orchestrated her own surprise and then publicized it as proof of how beloved she is. The desperation to control the narrative has become so overwhelming that she is staging her own spontaneous moments. Looking at the full picture, the pattern that emerges explains why the celebrity world has grown increasingly silent when it comes to Harry and Meghan. The Beckham situation established the template. Invite someone in, use them for whatever purpose you need, discard them when they become inconvenient, and then blame circumstances or departed staff members when questions arise. The Kardashians experienced a version of this. Anna Wintour was savvy enough to avoid getting caught in it, and countless other celebrities and public figures have apparently learned from watching what happened to those who came before them. Hollywood operates on relationships and reputation. People remember how they were treated, and they share those memories with others in their professional circles. When you burn someone like David Beckham, word gets around. When you create problems with a family as connected as the Kardashians, those problems echo through the industry. When Anna Wintour decides to keep her distance, every designer and editor takes notice. Harry's phone calls falling on deaf ears are not a temporary situation that better public relations can fix. Trust once destroyed does not rebuild through outreach attempts. The people he is calling remember the Oprah interview. They remember the Netflix documentary. They remember Spare and all its revelations. They know that anything they share with Harry might end up in his next project, reframed through whatever narrative the Sussexes are pushing at the moment. After everything we have seen over the past several years, the conclusion is unavoidable. The privacy argument stopped making sense a long time ago. You cannot sit down with Oprah for a globally televised interview, sign a $100 million Netflix deal, release a memoir packed with family secrets, launch a podcast about your personal life, and then complain that people will not leave you alone. They want privacy when it suits them and a camera crew when there is money on the table. The celebrity world has recognized this contradiction, and they have adjusted their behavior. They are polite in public because that is what professionals do. But the invitations to private events have dried up. The collaborative opportunities have disappeared. The warm endorsements from industry leaders are going elsewhere. If the people who actually know Harry and Meghan, who have spent time with them, who have tried to build professional or personal relationships with them, if those people are declining to return phone calls and refusing to be photographed together, what does that tell the rest of us about who the Sussexes really are? The Beckham rejection was not petty. It was not about one awkward moment in Australia. It was the natural consequence of a pattern that has alienated ally after ally. David Beckham learned his lesson. The Kardashians learned theirs. Anna Wintour never needed to learn because she saw it coming and kept her distance from the start. The question now is not whether Harry and Meghan can rebuild their celebrity relationships. The question is whether there is anyone left willing to give them the chance to try. Based on everything we have seen, the answer appears to be no. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next one.